Just watched you talk about open government here at the Government 2.0 Summit, and you offered, I'd say, a balanced and fairly critical look at how the open government directive from the current administration has actually played out in practice. And it turns out that implementation is much harder than saying go do it. What's been the progress of open government in the United States since the first, I suppose, directive last December?
Well, it's really hard to say, and I'm stumbling about what to say, because I think the promise of what the administration has done was very inspiring, was terrific. We were very, very enthusiastic about it, but the delivery has left a lot to be desired. And I think in part the delivery has suffered because the administration and the people in the administration do not actually have the authority to command anything to happen. And so it's been an internal process of persuasion. But we have decades and decades and decades of resistance to making information, putting data out, particularly making it available, publicly online, a resistance to that. And so there's a huge, let's sum it up by calling it a cultural resistance to changing the way government does business with respect to data. And we're now beginning to see that pushback. And it may be slow, it may be, sort of just reluctance. But the bottom line is we are not seeing the kind of data being made available that we were promised. And it's time to, I think, for us to begin to step up the pressure on the administration to hold them to their promises.
Now, one of the political realities as we sit here in September is that there's looking at Nate Silver's predictions, pretty good chance that at least the House is going to turn over. What is that going to mean towards the Transparency Caucus's ability to really not just ask for but demand more information? And what kind of awareness is there within Congress itself of the utility of bulk data, right? Not just posting PDFs online when there's a notice of proposed rulemaking, but actually doing some of the more wonky things that make a real difference.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things about the transparency movement as it's beginning to develop has been that it's really a transpartisan movement. So there are conservatives, there are liberals, there are libertarians who want to see government data, and if you look at sort of a range of opinion is expressed through editorials in newspapers, we see it across the board. So the change in administration, or the change in Congress in particular, might actually give a boost to seeing greater transparency, whether it's within Congress, because the Republicans have been very, very strong in calling for greater government transparency. They've been very strong about calling for more information about Congress being put online as well. So we might actually see a boost in support from Congress if things actually turn over.
Now, that's an interesting contrast too if you look across the Atlantic. The new administration there under Cameron actually is, most people would say, right of center from the conservative side, and they actually have put a very strong push towards using technology to both try to get feedback from citizens about where to cost cut, and also in terms of releasing data. When you contrast the different programs, one is arrived from one side of the political spectrum, the other from the other. Where are the commonalities or differences in terms of the end goals?
Right. Well, I think the commonality, whether it's a conservative perspective in the UK or a conservative perspective in the US or a liberal one, is the issue of accountability. So the Sunlight Foundation is very interested in accountability for government and how it does its work, and for the entities that actually report to government. So there's, I don't even know what the numbers are, but millions of entities that report to government, everything from labor unions to corporations, to people who receive various kinds of benefits and subsidies. And that information is buried, and without having that kind of information, in the public arena, we have no idea how government is conducting its work, how the contractors are doing its work. And so I think it's the issue of accountability of government, whether you're looking for efficiency or you're looking for effectiveness or simply how programs are going, or data that might help you, find your local healthcare clinic. People are very interested in this issue, and it doesn't have a political label, which is why I think the potential to engage the demand, by citizens in the push for more of this kind of online information is very real and very possible, because it doesn't have a political mantle associated with it.
So this is, an interesting discussion around, I think, how things are cloaked in language sometimes, in the sense that Web 2.0, people say, what the heck is that? It's a nebulous term, but they know what things are when you talk about Wikipedia or blogs or podcasting or Facebook or YouTube or all those things which allow people to publish to the web.
Right, right.
Government 2.0 is actually a very similar sort of space, and I think that there are some strong points made already this morning about how this doesn't really take off until people are involved in it themselves.
Yeah,
and you've actually said that in a strong way.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, there are two sides to the equation of what Sunlight is trying to create. One is to get government to publish information and its data. And it's government, it's sort of in its traditional role. It's not interested. It's not in its sort of cultural DNA to do that. But it's also to engage citizens in helping to demand that data and help reinvent government, truly co-create government. And it's really our job to work with both sides of that equation, work with the public, which is, very cynical about government. It doesn't ever do anything right. It never has the information it needs. It can't hold anybody accountable. But also the government side of things, we need to be able to require government to put this data online. It's been promised to us, and so we really try to work both sides of this equation, because one doesn't really work without the other.
So this is actually something that leads to one of the Sunlight Foundation's strengths, which is Sunlight Labs, and have actually created any number of tools now online which enable people to do things with all that bulk data that does exist.
Right.
What are some of the tools that you've seen people really start to engage with and use?
Well, some of our most recent tools are some of really our most interesting, or maybe we just evolve into more interesting ones as time goes on. So we have a site called polygraph.com, and that allows you to take the text of any article or press release and insert it into a text box, and then have it analyzed according to the influences that might be forthcoming from any of the entities mentioned in that. It's very simple. You can use it as a bookmarklet, and it's been extremely popular. Or another site called influenceexplorer.com, and this allows you to type in the name of an entity, say BP, or T. Boone Pickens, and see the full report of the particular ways that that entity, that organization or individual might be applying influence using, money, lobbyists, government contracts they might receive. So some of these things that are literally built on top of data, or, the site that's all built on is called transparencydata.com, where the more sophisticated user can actually do bulk downloads of state and federal campaign finance data, contract data, eventually earmark data as well. These kinds of tools make it easy for journalists, for citizens to explore, and then that information in turn makes it easier to ask legislators questions about what government is doing, government officials as well.
So that actually is the tie-in. It's something that actually Mika Sifri has talked about, who you know well from the Personal Democracy Foundation.
Right, one of our senior consultants.
Indeed. And he's talked about, with respect to that live stream that's got set up from the oil spill in the Gulf, here's something that thousands and thousands of people were watching online, but there wasn't, for most of them, a way to then express whatever they are feeling in terms of seeing that, a call to action.
Right.
What ways are developing for people to actually be empowered using the new collaborative tools online to be co-creators of government?
Yeah, well, I think there are stages that we think that citizens probably have to go through. I mean, using social media as a way of talking with, interacting with their public officials is certainly, a great place to start. We have another project called the Sunlight Live, in which we do, take live streams of public events and create a widget of sort of campaign finance information if that's relevant, informing the debate about why people might be saying what they are saying, and we also have a live blog going on that people can engage with us on. And so we found this to be a very popular way for people to begin to understand what it means to participate, in both making news or telling news, in a different way, and also engaging with government. People haven't learned these skills. But what we're excited about is the potential for social media and other kinds of platforms that are being developed for people to actually begin to use technology as a way to engage with their government, from their living rooms or from their offices or wherever they might be. It makes it easier for people.
So one of the things I've been watching as these different tools have developed from the first town hall that the Obama administration pulled off with Google Moderator, and now they're using CitizenTube, which is a mashup of YouTube and Moderator, and then different presences, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or elsewhere. They're developing in the context of all of the people who were formerly viewers, those formerly known as the audience, right? Who now have the ability to talk to one another about a program, and or about policy, or about a show, about a speech, whatever it happens to be. We can all talk to one another about it, and there's an opportunity, whether you're a television producer, a government official, or business executive, to then get real-time sentiment analysis from that. But there's also, I think, often a real concern about that system being gamed. And you can see quite transparently how some questions were filtered up to the top. What are some of the ways that that can be filtered without depriving people of their voice? Is it about
Well, I think we're still very much experimenting with that, and I would certainly give lots of kudos to the White House for trying various platforms, some of which seem to be working, some of which have obviously had issues along the way. I think we don't know the answer to that, but I think what is surprising is that these platforms are not gamed more often. That in fact mostly what you see on the sites that allow this discussion is a pretty civil discussion. On one of our sites, opencongress.org, which is a joint project between us and the Participatory Politics Foundation, we created a comment feature some time ago for pieces of legislation, and we had no idea whether people would come and comment on legislation. I mean, it sounds so wonky, right? But on unemployment insurance, for example, we've had over 100,000 comments on this legislation. And it's all been civil. I mean, not all of it's been completely appropriate. Some, it's almost like sort of help me find, where do I find information kind of things, but it's also not inappropriate. It's like, what are people concerned about? They want to know where to, how they apply for their unemployment benefits. And so I think what's more surprising than how much is gamed is how much isn't gamed. And recognizing that we're still in the very, beginning stages of, figuring this out and developing it. But when you go to a site like Open Congress and you can find other people who are interested in the issues that you're interested in, this has a way of creating online communities that also have the possibility of, being translated to offline communities. In any case, it is more engagement in politics and policy than we've seen with people who didn't have the opportunity or the access to technology to do this. But I think it's also really important, Alex, to understand that there are real differences between collaboration, participation, engagement, and transparency. And for Sunlight, it's the transparency piece that we focus on most neatly. Now, we feel that without the transparency, it is hard to have an open and honest conversation, collaboration, or participation. And while we don't think that transparency alone will solve any of the problems or engage people, without it, we think we're sort of really nowhere. So for us, it's a first step, not a be-all and end-all. But many people are confusing the transparency with the collaboration, with the participation side of things. And it's very important to separate those. And they can be separated into separate silos. So
that actually points back to the issue of having dashboards, whether it's for IT spending, whether it is for recovery.gov and the kind of use of recovery dollars, anywhere else. It has to have some level of validation by a third party, and then to be grounded so everyone has the same playing field to discuss what's actually
precisely. And even before that, the data has to be accurate. And as I talked about today, the data at usaspending.gov is wildly inaccurate. We cannot make the numbers add up. They don't add up. The data is missing. Some of it's too high. Some of it's too low. So you've got to start with data accuracy, and government's first responsibility, as one of the speakers said this morning, is to make sure that it provides raw, machine-readable access to its data. If it doesn't do anything beyond that, then so be it. But we would like to see, of course, government build some basic tools on top of that, and they've done that, but sometimes they've built tools before they've assured that the data is accurate, and that's actually what's happened at usaspending.gov.
Last question, because I know that you've got a busy day ahead, but I have to think this through. Is this open government initiative going to stick around past the Obama administration?
Well, I sort of feel that the open government initiative generally, particularly with transparency for data, is a little bit of a genie out of the bottle, so that it is, once it is here, it's going to be very hard to take it away by another administration. I would like to see it sort of more strongly implemented, much more progress being made before I feel totally confident that my initial take that it wouldn't go away is actually going to hold. So I think the administration, if they want it to stay, has to get more serious about issuing executive orders. They have to get more serious about enforcement. They have to get more serious with the agencies about making sure that there is compliance with their open government directive to cement it into the body politic. And that will keep it, I think, on the table for future generations.
Well, thank you very much for the perspective. And I hope people check out sunlightfoundation.com and Sunlight Labs and look at some of those tools.